Hi everyone, welcome back to my YouTube channel. If you are new here, my name's Amber and I am the owner of my small business Made by Amber, where I make handmade bags and hair accessories. In today's video, it's going to be a little bit different. I'm not going to be really showing you behind the scenes in like making things for my business, but I'm going to show you guys how I make one of my favorite things I like to make as gifts or for myself, which is a quilt. I'm going to try and be as step-by-step as possible in this video, and in the description box I'll leave as much other notes and dimensions if you miss them throughout the video, so please reference the description box for additional notes throughout the video. I will try my best to put dimensions on the screen and explain things as much as possible. But yeah, I love making quilts, and I haven't made one since 2023 when I had my first major hip operation. I made myself a quilt. It's actually in the corner. I might show you guys that later. I made myself a quilt to have in the hospital room during my recovery period while I was in there, just to kind of, if you guys have ever been in a hospital, you guys know it's kind of sad and like not colorful, so I made that for myself to kind of boost my spirits up in that time period. But I'm gonna make myself another duck quilt, and I've actually loved making quilts. I made 2 quilts with a minky backing, which I love, and my sister's been loving hers. I gifted her one, a stitch quilt, for Christmas this past year, and she loves it, and I see her using it all the time. It's very warm, very comfortable, so I wanted to make myself one for myself. So I'll show you guys the fabric. Okay, so I'm all set up here at the cutting mat. I hope you guys can hear me well enough. But what I'm gonna do is, I first off like to have my fabric in these little mini bolts, which is very beneficial because you can kind of just lay out everything really nicely. So I'm gonna lay this out. So another thing too is for the size quilt I'm making, it's like a twin size type of quilt. So I'm using about a yard for each color I'm doing for 4 colors, so you need 4 yards, and then you need about another 3/4 of the yard for the binding, and I use about 3 to 4 yards for the backing, same with the batting, just so you guys can start getting some measurements. Obviously most of that will also be down in the description box below if you missed that. So the first thing I really like to do, let me re-angle you guys so you can see this a little bit better. So if you can see here, I have everything lined up. I like to use the 1-inch mark line down here at the bottom, lined up to the side. This way you're lined up perfectly here, just so that I can also see the measurement numbers, because if you go farther down, I don't like reading the small ones. I like the big font. That's just who I am. So for the squares, they're going to be 7 by 7. So I have my cutting ruler here. I love using this add-on feature to it just because it helps me cut better. So I'm just going to line it up to the 7 mark. And also you can get these, I believe, on Amazon. I got mine at Joann's, but as we all know, Joann's is fully liquidating, so I'm not sure if they're available right now. And then you're just going to need a rotary cutter. You can get these really anywhere. I've seen them at Walmart. They're on Amazon. So I'm just going to start cutting out strips that look like this. That one didn't fully cut through. And I like to start out by cutting out strips like this of just 7 inches. So I'm just going to do that for the green one really quickly. Okay guys, so we're back down here, and so just as an explanation, it's going to be 7 squares this way, so 7 squares wide, and 10 squares in height. So you want to make sure you have 7 here and 10 going that way. So seeing how we have 10 in height, I know that there's 10 rows. So what I'm basically going to do is I start from one end, and I start collecting each square on top of each other like so, like this. And this, you are going to take a Post-it note and label it as 1, knowing that it's row 1. And when we go to sew it, you're just going to take your top piece off and your second piece off, put them together, sew them, and keep going. So that's what we're going to do when we get to the sewing step. But this is how you are going to label each row. So I'm just going to take a safety pin, label my first Post-it note as 1. It can be super messy. It doesn't really matter as long as you understand it. And then I'm just going to collect all of these and pin it all together so I know that this is row 1, like so. And I set that aside, and I'm going to do that for the rest of the rows, but I'm going to prep all my sticky notes really quickly. Okay, I have all my squares cut out. So I am gonna separate them, and then I'm gonna bring you guys on the floor because I want to show you guys how I lay this out. In terms of laying out how you want your quilt to look, and then kind of how to collect the things without having to leave a massive quilt on your floor. Um, I know that there's some quilters out there who actually have like this wall that they can place it on. I wish I had that, but I just don't have the space for it in my room. That could be like future sewing room idea. But I'm gonna bring you guys on the floor, and then we're gonna show you guys how to set it up. Okay, I'm on the floor right now. This is a really bad angle, but I'm just gonna separate these into each of their corresponding color groups. So I like to start off with one of the solid colors, so I'm going to choose yellow, and then I'm just going to lay it out on the floor. You guys can't really see that, so let me reposition you guys. Alright, so we're back down here, so I'm just going to lay this out, and then it's kind of up to you on how you want to do this. Next, I kind of want to do the daisy one. And then I want to do my actual print like so. And then my green one. And then again, you're going to follow the pattern that you chose out between the 4 prints. So mine's going to be yellow, daisy, duck, green. So I'm going to go back to my yellow, back to my daisy, and back to my duck. And then, so there's about, so you have 7 squares across. So the green was the last one, so I'm going to put green here. And seeing how yellow's the next one, I'm putting yellow. And now you can see that there's the cross that you are going to make. And then your daisy. And then your duck. And you can see how the squares are going at an angle, like a diagonal angle, so yellow is going to keep going down, and then there's going to be another angle one once yellow hits the end. So I'm going to keep setting these up, and then you'll see how it kind of creates the angle and everything like that. You can see this is my quilt all laid out. The diagonal squares going all the way across. This is laid out backwards just because I started from here and went that way. So I want to get back on the floor again and then show you guys how to kind of assign it. So I'm going to set you guys up over there. Hey guys, so we're back down here. And so just as an explanation, it's going to be 7 squares this way, so 7 squares wide, and 10 squares in height. So you want to make sure you have 7 here and 10 going that way. So seeing how we have 10 in height, I know that there's 10 rows. So what I'm basically going to do is I start from one end and I start collecting each square on top of each other like so. Like this. And this, you are going to take a post-it note and label it as 1, knowing that it's row 1. And when we go to sew it, you're just going to take your top piece off and your second piece off, put them together, sew them, and keep going. So that's what we're going to do when we get to the sewing step. But this is how you are going to label each row. So I'm just going to take a safety pin, label my first post-it note as 1. It can be super messy. It doesn't really matter as long as you understand it. And then I'm just going to collect all of these and pin it all together so I know that this is row 1. Like so, and I set that aside, and I'm going to do that for the rest of the rows, but I'm going to prep all my sticky notes really quickly. Alrighty, now that we have kind of collected everything together, this is what each individual set will look like. Stack of everything in your row with the number of the row with a safety pin attached to it. So the next steps are going to be assembling and sewing this together, but I'm going to take a pause right here right now as I'm filming just because I have to get ready to start going to school pretty soon and do some other schoolwork before I head over to school. But it won't be a break for you guys, it'll be in the next clip. But in that next clip, I'll show you guys how we're going to start assembling everything together in terms of the squares. So that's it for now for just this part of the video. Next is going to be the assembling part. So I'll see you guys there. Okay, we are back to making the quilt. It's been about a week since I last filmed this video, but that's because finals came around the corner faster than I thought they would. So I finished them up. I'm officially done with school at this point that I'm filming this video. So I got about 2 weeks-ish from today before I am leaving for Costa Rica for a school trip. So this video is mostly going to be posted when I'm gone. So there, like, in the meantime, my Etsy shop, when I'm gone, my Etsy shop will be closed, but I will still be accepting orders on my Shopify website. They just won't be shipped until after I get back. I'll be gone for about 9 days, so when you're seeing this, it's like 2 days, I think, before I arrive back home. So yeah, I'm very excited for that trip, but a little nervous for the plane ride down. But you know, I just pray that we're all safe and stuff when we all go down. I actually might film that trip, but I may not, just because of how much we're doing in a day that I don't think I'll keep up with it. And I know some students are okay with me filming for my channel, but I'm not sure about every other student because there's 18 of us going. So I also just want to respect their privacy in that sense. But I may like show you guys some pictures or post some pictures on my Instagram when I get back from when I was down there. So yeah. But back to the point of this video, which is making the quilt. So last time where we left off, we had everything laid out and we made our piles. So I'm just going to set you guys up and show you guys how I sew all these squares. And I'm basically going to assemble the front part, and then if I have time today, because I do have work today at my part-time job, depending on how far I get already, then I'll start assembling all the pieces together. Quick note, I'm going to show you guys the batting I was using. At the start when I started filming this, I didn't have it in stock to make a big enough quilt because I have like scrap remnants from makeup bags. But I'm going to show you guys what I'm using for this project. Alright, so for this project, you can honestly get this at Walmart, which might be the cheapest place to get it. I'm not 100% sure. I've gotten cheaper batting for my sister's quilt and my boyfriend's quilt at Hobby Lobby, but it was a different brand. I actually got like a king size for like $7, while this is a medium size, so twin to travel size projects. This was $7, so it's still the same thing. I guess it's whatever you guys prefer. But this is the Polyfill Low Loft quilting batting. It's 100% polyester. I'm using the size medium, and it's for twin and travel size projects. It's lightweight and breathable. Just because I'm using the minky, I like to use something that's low loft, just because there's so much warmth when you have the quilt on with the minky that this makes it a little bit less warm, I guess you can say. If I were to use a cotton backing, I would prefer something more medium to heavy loft, or ultra loft is what they call it. I use the ultra loft for my bags. It's like this thick. This is fairly thin and breathable, so yeah, this, if you guys want to take a screenshot of that, this is what I'm using. This is about $7 at Walmart. I used to also get this at Joann's, but seeing how they're going out of business, I don't know how much they are there, or if they even had them in stock by the time I'm filming this video. And I know they also sell this brand at Hobby Lobby. I just don't remember what price they're at. Just because I typically get this at Walmart because I found it cheaper there. And it's also convenient because when I do shopping for my skincare products, I just pick this up and stuff like that. So let's get started. I'm going to angle you guys correctly so that you guys can see what I'm doing, and then we'll just get to sewing. So I'm going to take my first row. I'm going to do this to show you guys, and then I'm just going to do the rest independently. So what you're going to want to do is, I always like to keep the number, because when I'm done putting these squares together, I like to put the number back on so I know which row it is. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm taking the first one and then the second piece, which is the daisies, and I'm going to flip them right side together. So when I say right side, it's the side that has the print, because the wrong side is the side that doesn't really have the design. So I'm going to line them up. I don't really like to pin it because it's kind of a waste of time, because they're cut out perfectly where you can line them up really nice. And I just line it up where the end hits the end of my presser foot, end up with the presser foot, and I'm just going to sew right along it. And then you're just going to open it up like this, and then you have your first and your second square. And you're going to take your next square, which for me is the actual pattern print, which is the duck, and I want to make sure that they're all kind of facing upward, so I want to make sure all the ducks are facing the correct way. And then you're just going to put the duck on top of that second piece, so your second and third, like so, line them up, and then just sew again. Then you're going to open that up, and now you have your first, second, and third. We're going to go for the fourth, same thing again. Open that up, and then your fifth square, same thing again, right sides together. And then we have another daisy, so 6 piece, like so. And then our last 7 piece, which is our duck. And I like to take a look to see what orientation the duck is on this side, so I like to make sure it's the same facing upwards at the end, like so. And then line that up. And like so. And now you have your first row done. So what I like to do at the end, I take my number tag, and then I'm just going to clip that back on and set it aside. So I'm gonna work on the rest of my rows, and then we'll start putting the rows on top of each other. So I'll film a little bit of that, and then we'll start assembling the rows together. So I just finished assembling all my rows. So now what you're going to want to do is find your row 1 and your row 2 together, and we are going to start assembling all the rows. So I like to put it out kind of like this, so you can make sure everything's aligned, and then you're just going to flip it like this. And now you're going to take those seams like this. You see how the seams are together? I'm just going to open up that seam like so, so that these seams lay flat when you sew them. And I'm just going to get a pin, or you can clip it and just pin it, and then I'm also just going to pin right here. And then you're just going to keep going down, pinning those seams together and opening up those seams like so. Typically, I think most quilters would give these a press right about now, but I'm also lazy, and quilters, please don't come after me. This is how I like to do it, and I've always had good results. So I'm just gonna keep going like so. I actually might switch to my clips soon because I've actually preferred using my clips more recently. I used to think of them as a pain, but I actually like them a lot more now. So keep going. There may be some seams that may not align perfectly, but I'm not trying to make the perfect quilt, and that's okay. I honestly think a little imperfection in some quilts makes it more unique. That might be a controversial topic, but in my opinion, nothing's perfect. So yeah. We're just doing the best we can because this is a beginner style quilt. So I do want to get better with my quilting techniques, but right now I'm just trying to show you guys a simple way to do it. Now that you have it pinned, you are just going to stitch it right along here. Alrighty, so now we just assembled our first 2 rows. So now what you're going to do is you're just going to keep this, take your row 3, line this up, and then I would typically flip it in backwards and do it this way because you want to make sure, because if you guys see, my ducks are facing a certain way, so you want to make sure everything is facing a certain way just so everything lines up really well. I'm actually going to switch my bobbin. I highly do recommend that you pre-thread a lot of your bobbins before sewing, just because you are going to run through them quite quickly. So I have a couple that are already ready to go. So I'm just going to keep going and assembling all the rows, and then I'll bring you guys downstairs, and then we're going to press and start putting everything together. So okay, so for the next part of this video, you will see that I am pressing down the middle part of the seam with my iron. I'm using a fairly big iron board, and I'm using one of the hottest settings, which is the cotton setting on my iron. And then after this, you're not going to see it right now, but I'm going through and pressing the mini seams that are on the top part. So you just want to make sure you keep opening those seams and pressing them. I always do the first seam first for each row, which is the long one, and then I go through and do the little mini ones. And I'm just going to keep doing that. As you can see right there, I'm pressing the little seam right there. But I'm just going to keep doing this until every single seam is open, and then afterwards you'll see that I'm going to go ahead and flip the quilt over and press the right side down and giving it a really good press. So this is just all I'm going to be doing, and I'm just going to fast forward it from here. But this is a pretty simple part. I find this very therapeutic, so I'm just going to keep going with this. So I just finished pressing everything, so now I'm going to start assembling everything. I'm going to explain as much as I can while doing that. So I'm going to be laying everything out in layers on my floor. I just cleaned up some of my floor so I have enough room to do it. But yeah, we're going to start assembling everything together so that we can do the binding and stuff like that. So okay, we are back with another voiceover. So for this part, we are just going to take our minky fabric or whatever you're using for the backing, and you are going to lay it out on your floor as tight as possible without any wrinkles whatsoever. And next we are just going to take that batting layer and add that right on top. This is just pretty much going to be a big sandwich of layers. And again, you're just putting this on with as little wrinkles as possible. And now we are going to take our quilt and add that final top layer, and you're just going to smooth that on. Now I'm taking some safety pins and I'm pinning all around, and this is going to keep all your layers in place as we are sewing and assembling the last couple parts of the quilt. And next I'm just trimming off the sides, and I'm leaving about a ½ inch around just for seam allowance purposes, and then I'm just pinning the sides because I am going to do a seam right around this just to get everything going. This next part I'm going to use a 1/4 inch seam allowance and just put it around the whole quilt. And now I'm just trimming off the excess so we can put the binding on. And now you are going to undo your binding roll and start pinning it where it's facing outward. For this part, this is a corner, you're going to want to fold it like that, make a press, and then fold it again like that. And now you're just going to do a ½ inch seam allowance here. And this is the hard part. You want to fold back and then stop what you're sewing, and then start sewing again, and that's going to create the perfect seam for your quilt. Okay, so we just finished putting on the binding and stuff, so now I'm going to go downstairs again, and it's probably going to be another voiceover. I'm sorry, but I get such in the zone when I'm sewing that I sometimes don't like explaining everything that I'm doing. But we're going to press this, and I hand sew my binding clothes. I'll show you guys the type of stitch I use. I don't know what it's called, but I'll show you guys how I do it. I know a lot of other quilters that make quilts usually like machine sew it clothes, but I've been taught to hand sew it clothes, and I think it also looks neater. But this is a part where if you do want to just sewing machine sew it, I recommend that. If you wanted to, there's a bunch of YouTube channels or YouTube videos out there that'll probably explain it. But I'll show you guys how to hand sew it. Plus I like hand sewing once in a while, so it's very therapeutic. So yeah, and it's really nice because you can hand sew and be curled up in it. I typically use pins to pin the binding, but I'm thinking about actually trying my clips this time so I'm not poking myself everywhere. But it's fantastic, and I love it so much already. So I want to bring you guys downstairs, and we are going to do the binding. For one of our last steps of this quilt, we're just going to press that seam open like you see that I'm doing here. And then next I'm taking these quilts I got from Amazon, and now you're just going to press the seam back onto the back side of the quilt, making sure that corner is nice and clean, and then just clipping it so you can hand sew it or machine sew it. Okay, so we just finished the binding and stuff, so I'm going to not quickly, but I'm going to show you guys how I hand sew the binding clothes, and then I'll kind of show you the behind the scenes, because I do take my time sometimes binding and hand sewing it all closed, because I typically watch Netflix while I do it, but I'll show you guys how I do the stitching. I am already liking the clips on the quilt that I'm using to hold it closed, just because I'm not getting poked at. So I'm going to set you guys up so that you guys can get a nice close-up on what I'm doing. So yeah, let's get started on the hand sewing part, because we are almost done. We're at the finish line, and I'm so excited about this quilt, and yeah, I just love making quilts. So I have my quilt here pretty much ready to go. I recommend finding a colored thread that matches pretty closely to your binding. I picked out this green color from the collection I have. It's a little bit lighter, but it's not really going to show. So I'm just going to quickly open this up to get started. So I'm going to start near a corner, just so you guys can also know how to do it at a corner as well. For this, find my pin that I typically use if I can find it. I just used it the other day. But I'm gonna first undo quite a bit of string, but not too much. You are going to need to do this a couple times throughout the quilt, because if you were to have enough string to go through the whole quilt, it's going to get knotted very fast. And the trick with this type of string is you actually want to fold it in half, like so. And now we're going to take the two strings that we have together, and we're just going to create our knot. And I'm just going to move it up until it all forms a string, and then you have this little loop at the end. I don't know if you guys can see that. This is where you're going to thread your needle, like so. And now we are ready to start. So I'm going to zoom you guys in a little bit more and get you guys closer. So hopefully this is close enough for you guys to see so far. So I'm going to start about here by one of my pink, and I'm going to go under the binding like so. And this is like the first stitch. And I'm just going to hide this tail this way. It'll be hidden better more once we finish that off. I'm also just going to take off this clip so it's not in my way. So what you're going to do is you're going to go back down. So you have your stitch like so. It's not attached, it's just under everything. And you're going to make sure it's all lined up, all those seams and raw edges are hidden, and you're just going to take that loop like so, go down, and I go about an inch away like so. You see where my needle is by my thumb? And you're just going to pull that through, and you're done. And you also want to make sure you're not going to see it on the other side, so you're literally going through the middle. In this stitch you can kind of see, but I kind of make it as close as I can to the binding to make sure it's secure. This is just the first stitch, so that's why it's like that. And you're just going to keep going like this. And just tighten it as you go around. And the minky can be kind of a tough fabric to sew through, so just be cautious of that. And I like to give it a nice tug. And I have some strings in this corner, so I'm just going to go ahead and kind of trim those down just to make it a little easier. And we're just going to keep sewing like so. at the corner. So I have about an inch before I hit the corner, and I want to make sure the next place I come up is right there in the middle of that seam. And I'm going to give it a nice tug, and then I'm just going to do a couple stitches going up this to make sure this is secure and any of the raw edges are hidden, like so. And I'm doing very small stitches. And I kind of do 3 to 4, so my last one's going to go under, but I'm also going to shoot it under back to where I need to start, like this. I don't know if you guys can see that. So I'm shooting under, I'm going to do my last 4 stitch, and then I'm going to shoot it back through like that. And then you're just going to keep on going like this. And that's how I typically do most of my corners, just because I don't like that flappiness, so I like to make sure they're extra secure. And I'm just going to make sure I pull every time, just to make sure it's secure. And I'll take my clips out as I go, cutting any of these like strings from when we did the binding. So you can see this one, I did get a stitch right there. So I'm just going to pull this out really quickly, and I just use my needle to pull that stitching out, and then I just re-thread my needle. It's not really a big deal. I try to catch it before I have a whole bunch. So, but if you have a couple, it's no big deal. It's going to be very unnoticeable, so. And yeah, this way it goes a lot faster. So yeah, that's how you're going to do the binding. So I'm just going to go sit down and watch one of my shows on either Netflix or Hulu, and I'll kind of give you guys a time lapse of me doing that. I don't think I'm going to finish it today before I go to work, but I'll keep showing you guys my progress on it. So, and then our last step is to take this out, and we're going to do one last final pressing, and then I'll show you guys the big reveal. So